The day I put up my gate, everything changed. Karen, my neighbor who wasn't even on my land, stormed up to it like she owned the whole world. Her face turned red, her voice cracked, and she shouted that my gate was breaking her community rules. Rules that didn't even apply to me. I didn't understand why a stranger cared so much about what I built on my OWN 50 acres, until the truth slipped out. Karen wasn't angry about the gate. She was angry because she'd been using my land, secretly, for years. And when my gate finally blocked her from entering, her entire hidden operation fell apart. But I had no idea just how far she'd go to take back control, lies, threats, and something far worse. So I hit record, because the fight for my land was just beginning. I still remember the sound the gate made the first time it closed. A deep, slow metallic thud, the kind that echoed across my land like a promise, or a warning. I had spent months clearing the brush, leveling the drive, installing the posts, and welding the frame myself. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't huge. But it was mine. It marked the line between my space and the world outside it. I expected peace after that. Quiet. Privacy. A clean boundary after weeks of non-stop interruptions from strangers who treated my land like a shortcut, a playground, or an extra parking lot. But peace didn't come. Instead, Karen did. I didn't know her name back then. All I knew was that the woman in the bright visor and oversized sunglasses marched toward my freshly installed gate like it had personally offended her entire bloodline. She stopped right in front of it, hands on her hips, tapping her foot so hard I swear I could feel it through the gravel. "You can't put this here," she yelled across the fence. My brain froze for a second. I looked around. The dry fields, the cedar trees, the sky, everything was mine. My survey markers were still in the ground. My name was on the deed. So I finally asked, "Why not?" "It's my driveway." She stepped closer, jabbing a finger between the bars as if she expected them to move aside for her. "Because it violates the community rules." I actually laughed. Not mocking her, just confused. "What community? I'm not part of any HOA." She blinked, like my answer didn't make sense. "You're adjacent to one." I shrugged. "Adjacent isn't included." That's when she changed. Her face tightened. Her voice lowered. A different kind of anger came out, one that wasn't about a gate but about control. "You can't just block access like this," she hissed. "People use this road. People who don't own it," I said calmly. Her jaw clenched again. And that's when I knew this wasn't about rules. This was about power. She expected me to move the gate simply because she said so. I tried staying polite. "Look, I'm not trying to cause problems. I just want privacy." But she stepped back, pointed at the gate dramatically, and said, "We'll see what the board thinks about this." And that's when she walked away, muttering to herself like she'd just declared war. I didn't know it then, but that moment, her anger, her entitlement, her certainty that she could control something she didn't own, that was the beginning of everything. The fights. The threats. The secrets that would come out later. The gate didn't just block a road. It exposed a truth she had been hiding for years. That first encounter felt strange, but I brushed it off. New land comes with odd neighbors sometimes, and I figured she was just one of those HOA people who couldn't function without rules to lean on. So I kept working on the property. The gate stayed locked. I got busy clearing more space for my cabin foundation. But 2 days later, I noticed something weird. The gravel in front of the gate looked disturbed. Fresh tire tracks. Footprints. Someone had come right up to the metal, ratted the chain, and walked around like they were inspecting it. I checked my trail cam footage, expecting maybe a lost driver. Instead, it was Karen again. She was pacing in front of my gate like a restless security guard. She tugged the chain, rattled it hard enough to wake the crows, and then she took pictures. Dozens of them. Angles, close-ups, even crouching shots like she was documenting a crime scene. She kept talking to herself. I couldn't hear everything, but one sentence was crystal clear: "He can't block my access." Not after all these years. My access. What was she talking about? I hadn't blocked anything except a dirt road people used as a convenience. A road nobody had permission to use anyway. So why was she acting like she had lost something valuable? I decided to walk to the other side of the property line, the side that bordered the HOA. And that's when I found the second clue, a narrow worn path running from behind her house straight onto my land. A path that looked used regularly. I followed it for a few minutes until it opened into a small clearing on my side of the fence line. And in the clearing, I found something I didn't expect, a makeshift wooden shed. Old. Weathered. Built entirely on my property. Maybe 20 feet across the line. It wasn't big, but it wasn't abandoned. Inside were gardening tools, bags of mulch, a rototiller, and even a stack of decorative stones. It looked like someone, likely Karen, had been storing landscaping supplies on my land for a long time. Suddenly, her reaction made sense. The gate wasn't the problem. Losing access to her little hidden storage space, that's what set her off. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I took photos. Documented everything. And then I closed the shed door and walked back. But I noticed something else while I was leaving, a fresh camera mounted on a tree. Not mine. Pointed directly at my land. That night, I sat on my porch long after dark, thinking about everything. Something wasn't right. Her obsession, the secret shed, the path. It felt like I had stumbled into a story that started long before I arrived. And I had a sinking feeling I had only discovered the edge of her. The next morning, Karen returned. This time she knocked on the gate instead of yelling. But the smile she forced on her face was worse than the anger. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," she said sweetly. "I didn't buy it." "What can I help you with?" I asked. She cleared her throat and said, "I just wanted to explain why this gate is such a problem. You see, the previous owner gave the community permission to use this road. It's been that way for years." Her words were confident, practiced. Too practiced. But I had already dug through the deed, easements, and county records the night before. No such agreement existed. Not even a verbal note. I decided to test her. "Interesting," I said. "Do you have a copy of that agreement?" Karen's smile froze. "Well, no, but everyone knows about it." "County doesn't," I replied. "And neither did the seller." Her eyes darted away. She wasn't expecting that. Then she switched tactics. "Look, it's just inconvenient for some of us. We've always used that road to reach the backfields. It's part of the community routine." I stared at her. "Community routine," I repeated. "Or your routine?" Her face twitched. She knew I knew. For a moment she dropped the act. Her expression sharpened again, the same way it did on the first day. She stepped closer to the gate and lowered her voice. "You're new here," she whispered. "You don't understand how things work. It's easier for everyone if you just unlock it. Easier for everyone, or easier for her." "I'm keeping it locked," I said simply. And with that, her entire demeanor cracked. Her lips curled, her cheeks flushed, and she spat out, "You're making a mistake." Then she walked off again, faster this time, angrier, muttering something into her phone. As soon as she was out of sight, I checked my camera footage again. This time I watched from 2 days before, going deeper into the timeline. That's when I found something that made my stomach drop. Karen wasn't the only one using my land. At least 5 different HOA neighbors were seen walking, driving, or storing things on that same path, using my property like it belonged to them. Boxes. Tools. Even landscaping crews. Then one clip caught my attention more than any other. Karen meeting with a man in the clearing. She handed him an envelope. He pointed at my side of the land. She nodded. A transaction. On my land. Suddenly everything clicked. This wasn't just a shortcut. This wasn't about community rules. This wasn't about a gate. Karen had been running something on my property. And the moment I locked that gate, her entire hidden operation collapsed. For a few days, I tried to ignore the whole situation. I told myself not to overthink it. Not every disagreement is a conspiracy. Not every strange neighbor is hiding something. I tried to focus on work, on clearing more of the land, on getting the foundation framed. But the truth is, once you see something, You can't unsee it. And once you catch someone lying, every word afterward feels like bait. Still, I had no solid proof of what that operation was. Not yet. But the proof was about to reveal itself, in a way I wouldn't forget. It started with a slip of paper. One quiet afternoon I was cutting boards behind my truck when I heard tires on gravel. A white SUV pulled up near the property line, not far from where the HOA border started. A woman stepped out quickly, slid an envelope into a metal mailbox attached to the common fence, and drove off. It was an HOA drop box, the kind they use to collect community forms. But the envelope she dropped fell right back out. Not onto their side. Onto mine. I walked over, mostly out of curiosity, thinking it might be junk mail. But when I picked it up, my jaw actually tightened. It was addressed to HOA Board Property Access Violation Report. And taped on the back was a note: Karen says he is blocking the back road again. Discussion for Thursday meeting. So that was it. She wasn't done. She was escalating. I wasn't planning to attend any meeting. Why would I? I wasn't part of them. I didn't pay dues. I didn't live under their rules. But now my name, my gate, my land was on their agenda. I didn't want to go inside. I didn't want a confrontation. So I made a decision: I would listen. Not spy. Just listen. When Thursday came, I parked my truck quietly on my side of the fence, where a line of thick cedar trees created a natural wall. The HOA's meeting house wasn't far, maybe 80 yards away. When they opened the windows for ventilation, voices carried farther than you'd think. At first, it was the usual HOA chatter: dues, pool repairs, landscaping issues. Then, about 20 minutes in, someone with a deep voice said, "Next item, Karen's report on the back access road." There was a shuffle of papers. A chair scraped. And then Karen's voice, sharp, authoritative, like she owned the room, filled the air. "As I've said before, the new landowner is blocking a road that has always been part of our community use." Someone corrected her: "It's not on the plat map." Because the previous owner didn't mind. She snapped. A woman asked, "Do we actually have an easement?" Karen didn't answer immediately. Instead she said, "I have used that road for over 15 years. So have many of us. That creates precedent." A man cut in. "Precedent isn't a legal easement." Karen's tone turned colder. "We have to make him understand that this affects all of us." Another voice said, "Maybe he just wants privacy. He seems like a reasonable guy." Karen's response made my blood chill. "No. He's trying to shut us out so he can take that land for himself. We've used it for community projects for years." Community projects? Was that what she called storing equipment on my land? Meetings? Transactions in envelopes? Then the HOA president asked, "Karen, what exactly have you been using the land for?" That's when everything went quiet. Karen hesitated. I could hear it in her breathing. Finally she said, "Gardening supplies." Just gardening. But the president wasn't sold. "You requested the landscapers to go through there last month. They were helping me with a private project," she snapped. "And the construction crew from March? That had nothing to do with this." Silence again. Then the president's voice lowered. "Karen, are you telling us the truth?" I swear I could feel the tension from outside. Karen's voice changed. Softer now. More careful. "I've been maintaining that back lot by myself for years. Long before he bought it. I've put time into it. Money. I've made it useful. Useful." That word hit me. Useful to her. Not to me. She continued, "He can't just come in, lock it up, and take everything I've built. Everything I've built. On my land." Then someone asked the question that revealed everything. "Karen, did you tell vendors and contractors that the land belonged to the HOA?" She didn't answer. Someone repeated the question, louder. Finally, Karen exhaled sharply and said, "It wasn't exactly lying. I was managing it. Someone had to." "You told them it was community property," the president said. "There are invoices with the HOA address." Invoices? I felt heat rising in my chest. She had been ordering work, charging vendors, making agreements all under the false claim that my land was HOA property. Then another man said what the whole room was thinking. Karen, if he finds out, he could sue you. I heard her chair scrape back so fast it hit the wall. He doesn't know anything, she snapped. And he won't unless someone tells him. That sentence hung in the air. Like a threat. Like a warning to the entire room. Let's move to the next item, the president finally whispered. Chairs shifted. Papers rustled. The tension slowly dissolved into background noise. The meeting carried on. But I stayed frozen behind the trees, my hands clenched so tight my nails left marks in my palms. Because in that moment, everything was clear. Karen wasn't just entitled. She wasn't just manipulative. She wasn't just angry about a gate. She had built an entire lie, a small empire of control on my land. And the gate? It didn't block a road. It blocked the illusion she had created. It revealed how much she was willing to do to maintain that control. And I knew, deep in my chest, that she wasn't done. Not even close. I walked back to my cabin slowly, the night wind cold against my skin, and I realized, this wasn't neighbor drama anymore. This was war. War she didn't want me to know was already happening. But I had heard every word. And now, I knew everything. I barely slept after the night of the HOA meeting. My mind kept replaying every sentence, every hesitation, every lie Karen had tried to sell to that room of people who didn't even fully believe her anymore. But what stuck with me most was how terrified she was that I would find out. Because that fear meant something. It meant she had more to hide. It meant the parts I'd already uncovered, the shed, the contractors, the path, were not the whole picture. They were just the surface. The symptoms of something much deeper. By sunrise, I knew one thing for sure, I needed to protect myself. Not with anger. Not with threats. With evidence. Real, undeniable evidence. So the next morning, before the dew had even dried on the grass, I walked the entire property again. Slowly this time. Carefully. Looking for anything I might have missed. And I found it. Not far from the clearing where the shed stood, tucked behind a row of thick overgrown bushes, was something that didn't belong. Something out of place. A stack of cement bags, half hidden under a top. And next to them, a set of fresh tire tracks, not from a car, but from a utility trailer. The dirt was still soft. Meaning whoever had been here recently. Very recently. Possibly the same morning. I lifted the top slowly. More landscaping materials. Decorative pavers. Bags of river rock. A rented soil tiller with a faded sticker showing Karen's street address. This was no small personal project. This was inventory. And it was on my land. I took photos of everything. Angles, close-ups, timestamps. Then I walked around the perimeter of the clearing again. That's when I found something even more shocking. A small, rectangular sign buried in the brush. The kind used by landscaping companies. It read, Maintenance sponsored by Willow Ridge HOA. Sponsored by the HOA? On my land? Meaning Karen had convinced the board, or at least certain members, that this area belonged to them. She'd been using my property as a storage yard, project space, maybe even a source of community credit, claiming she was maintaining land for the HOA that didn't belong to the HOA at all. And the kicker? They were probably paying her stipends for it. I kept searching the area until the sun was fully up. And then, I spotted faint footprints leading out of the clearing and into a thicket of trees. Deep footprints. Someone with weight behind them, or carrying something. My instincts told me to follow them. I walked about a quarter mile, pushing through branches and tall grass, until the land opened into another small, hidden pocket. And what I found there made my stomach twist. A second shed. Bigger. Newer. With a padlock. Not an old structure like the first one. This one was intentionally built, and recently. On land that was clearly mine. And I recognized the contractor's mark on the side of the shed, a company I had seen in Karen's earlier camera footage. I walked around it. No windows. Just a door and a lock. A long, freshly dug trench behind it, filled with cut brush. Whatever she'd built, She hadn't wanted anyone to see. It was on my land. It was locked. And it wasn't going away until I confronted her or got the sheriff involved. I pulled out my phone and took dozens of pictures. But as I walked back toward my cabin, something felt wrong. The forest felt too quiet. The wind too still. Then I realized what it was. There were fresh footprints behind mine in the dirt. Someone had followed me earlier. Or was following me now. I turned slowly, scanning the trees. No movement. No sound. But the feeling wouldn't leave. So I hurried back to the cabin. Locked the door. Sat down at the table. And stared at my phone, full of evidence. I had enough to go to the county. Enough to demand a survey enforcement officer. Enough to file a trespass report. Enough to get the sheriff involved. But something in me hesitated. Not out of fear. Out of understanding. If Karen had invested years into using this land. If she had built structures here. Held meetings here. Stored materials here. Made agreements here. Then taking it all away wouldn't just make her angry. It would break the illusion she'd built around herself and everyone around her. And people who live on illusions. People who build identities on control. They don't react lightly when the illusion collapses. I was still thinking about my next steps when it happened. A loud metallic clank echoed from outside. I rushed to the window. And there she was. Karen. Standing at my gate. With a bolt cutter. I felt my heart slam in my chest. The bolt cutter glittered in the sun. She looked furious, more furious than I'd ever seen her. She wasn't yelling this time. She wasn't pretending to be polite. She wasn't trying to reason. She was done pretending. She lined up the bolt cutter on my chain. Took a deep breath. And squeezed with everything she had. I ran out of the cabin before she could cut through it. "Hey!" I shouted across the field. She froze like a raccoon caught in headlights. Her hands slipped off the bolt cutter. She straightened her back. And then she yelled, "You can't do this. You can't block me. I need access." I reached the gate, breathing hard, adrenaline shaking through me. "You're trespassing," I said quietly. "And you're destroying my property." Karen didn't even blink. "You don't understand," she hissed. "Everything back there, my work, my projects, you can't just steal that." "I'm not stealing anything," I said. "You built on land that isn't yours." "It was mine," she yelled. "It was practically mine for years. Practically. Not legally. Not officially. Not on paper. But in her mind, she owned it." Then she stepped closer, and her voice changed, lower, strained, full of desperation I had never heard before. "You don't get it," she whispered. "If people find out, I'll lose everything." There it was. The truth. Not about land. Not about rules. Not about community. Karen wasn't afraid of losing access. She was afraid of being exposed. She grabbed the bolt cutter again and lifted it toward the chain. "Move," she warned. "Or I will cut this open." I didn't move. Instead, I slowly raised my phone and hit record. Her eyes widened. "What are you doing?" she snapped. I held the phone steady. "You need to leave," I said calmly. "Now." She dropped the cutter. Her face twisted. Her hands clenched into fists. "You're going to regret this," she spat. And without another word, she stormed off, faster than she'd arrived. The air was silent again. But this time, the silence felt like something dangerous had been set in motion. Something she couldn't stop. Something I couldn't undo. When I walked back to the cabin, I knew one thing. Karen wasn't just breaking rules. She was breaking. And broken people. They do desperate things. After Karen stormed away from the gate with the bolt cutter, I stood there for a long time, longer than I should have, just watching the dust settle behind her. Something in me knew this wasn't going to die down. Her anger wasn't the kind that fades. It was the kind that builds, layer by layer, until it explodes in every direction. And I hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. For the next 2 days, things were strangely quiet. No pacing at the gate. No surprise visits. No new tire tracks. But it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes before a storm, thick, suffocating, and unnatural. I kept working on the land. Installed more trail cameras. Backed up all the footage. Saved every photo and every recording. Prepared everything in case I needed law enforcement involved. But I kept coming back to her words, if people find out, I'll lose everything. What everything meant, I still wasn't sure. But I was about to find out. The HOA started showing up in groups on the third evening after the bolt cutter situation. Something unusual happened. I heard voices, multiple voices, near my gate. When I looked out from the porch, I saw 3 HOA members standing on the other side, talking quietly among themselves. 2 men and 1 older woman. Not people I'd seen before. They pointed at the gate. At the lock. At the fence line. Then one of them started walking along the property edge, scribbling notes on a clipboard. A clipboard. Like they were appraising something. I walked down calmly, not wanting to escalate anything. Evening, I said. The 3 of them froze like they hadn't expected me to be home. The older woman stepped forward first. Her smile was polite, but tense. We're from the Willow Ridge HOA. Karen told us there's been a misunderstanding. There it was. The spin. The rewriting of reality. A misunderstanding? I repeated. Yes, she said carefully. Apparently you installed a gate across a community access route. I shook my head. There is no community access route. And the land isn't part of the HOA. The man with the clipboard spoke up next, his tone more firm. Karen told us the previous owner granted long-term use to this side of the property. She said you were told before you purchased. That one actually made me laugh. Not a disrespectful laugh, just disbelief. No, I said. I wasn't told anything. And I've confirmed with county records there is no easement, no agreement, nothing. The 3 HOA members exchanged looks. The man with the clipboard lowered it slightly. The woman's smile faltered. They weren't fully convinced, but they weren't sure Karen was right either. Then the second man stepped forward, clearing his throat before speaking. If it's all right with you, he said, we'd like to inspect the back road. I blinked. No, I replied. You don't have permission to enter. The older woman tried again. It would really help us resolve this peacefully. I'm sure it would, I said. But you can resolve it without stepping onto private property. She opened her mouth again, but I cut her off, politely but firmly. This is not HOA land. And unless you have a court order or law enforcement with you, nobody from your community is allowed past this gate. Silence. Uncomfortable silence. The clipboard man nodded once, stiffly. The woman forced another tight smile. And the 3 of them walked away together, whispering in low voices. Karen had sent them. And whatever story she'd told them, she'd spun it well enough to get them involved. But that wasn't the part that bothered me. The part that bothered me came later that night. The flyers just after sunset, when the sky was turning dark and the trees were silhouettes against the horizon, I saw movement near the HOA entrance road. I couldn't see details, but I could see someone putting something onto the community bulletin board. A piece of paper. Then another. And another. Curiosity kept me awake, so around 10 p.m., I walked down the side trail that bordered their neighborhood. I stayed on my property, but close enough to see the board from angle through the trees. My heart dropped. Karen had plastered the board with flyers. Bold. Dramatic. Completely fabricated. They said, warning, new landowner illegally blocking community access. Safety risk, delivery routes now restricted. Property values may be affected by private gate. And the worst part? In small print near the bottom, report any suspicious behavior immediately. Suspicious behavior. As if I were a threat. As if protecting my own land made me dangerous. The next morning, things got worse. The sidewalk parade around 9 a.m., I was clearing branches near the fence when I saw a group of HOA neighbors walking along their sidewalk, 5 or 6 of them, pointing toward my land and whispering. One woman shook her head, looking angry. Another man folded his arms. Someone else said loudly, he can't just shut us out. This isn't how we do things here. It felt like a coordinated effort. Karen wasn't just fighting me now. She was using the entire community as a shield. And she'd told them I was some kind of invader who had come to take something from them. A narrative that was completely backward from the truth. But people believe the story they hear first, especially if it comes from someone who's lived there for years. Karen was smart enough to know that. She knew how to manipulate appearances. How to play the victim. How to stir emotion before facts could settle. And she was doing everything she could to turn the neighborhood against me before the truth could catch up. The friendly warning around noon that same day, someone knocked on my gate. Not pounding. Not yelling. Just knocking politely. It was an older man, maybe mid-60s, with a calm demeanor and a cap that said retired engineer. "Mind if I talk to you for a minute?" he asked. I walked up, cautious but open. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't rude. He looked conflicted. "I'm Tom," he said. "I live 2 streets over. Been in the HOA 20 years. Nice to meet you," I said. He nodded slowly, then lowered his voice. "I just want to warn you. Karen is telling everyone that you're threatening her." I felt my stomach drop. "What?" I asked, genuinely stunned. Tom nodded again. "She said you screamed at her. Said you told her she'd regret it if she came near the gate again. She's telling people you're unstable. Dangerous." I stood there speechless. I had recordings. I had footage. I had proof none of that ever happened. But truth doesn't travel as fast as gossip, especially in a tightly wound community that feeds on drama. Tom sighed, leaning against the metal bar of the gate. "I don't know you," he said. "But I've known Karen a long time. And she stretches the truth when she feels threatened." "Threatened by what?" I asked. He looked around as if making sure no one could hear him. "Losing control," he whispered. Then he stepped back and lifted his hand in a slow wave. "Just be careful. People are worked up right now. And she's pushing hard." He walked away. I stood there for a long time after he left, the weight of the situation finally settling into my chest. Karen wasn't just lying. She wasn't just manipulating. She was building a story where I was the villain. A story where she was the victim. A story where the whole neighborhood felt justified in pushing back. And stories like that spread fast. If this didn't stop soon, it wouldn't just be a land dispute. It would become personal, emotional, dangerous. And I knew deep down that the next move she made would cross an even bigger line. Because Karen wasn't fighting for land anymore. She was fighting for her reputation. And people who are terrified of losing reputation will burn down the world around them to keep the illusion alive. I wish I could tell you that after I sent the certified letter, everything settled down. I really do. But if part 6 showed you the calm before the storm, part 7 is where the storm finally realized it had teeth. And the storm's name was still Karen. For a few days, she went unusually quiet. No shouting at my mailbox. No pacing back and forth on the edge of the tree line. No late-night flashlight beams slicing through my property like she was searching for buried treasure. It was a silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt strategic. Almost like she was loading ammunition. And unfortunately, she was. "Sir, we need you to remove the gate." Day 4 of the silence, I was working on the pasture fence when a white SUV pulled up the driveway. I knew instantly it wasn't a visitor. Government plates. County logo on the door. 2 code enforcement officers stepped out. My stomach dropped. One of them asked, "Are you the owner of parcel 17B?" I nodded. He continued, "We received a complaint that your front gate is restricting an established community access point." I blinked at him, genuinely confused. Established access point? There's no access point on my land. It's private property. He pulled out a printed complaint form. Under complainant, it simply said, HOA representative, but the handwriting below it read like a child's signature. Karen. Of course. I asked the officer what exactly the complaint claimed. And hearing the list felt like someone was reading a comedy script, if the script had been written by a delusional tyrant. The complaint said, "My gate interfered with community safety. My land had been used historically as an access route for HOA activities. My refusal to allow shared use was a violation of HOA bylaws. I looked at the officer. With the straightest face I could manage, I said, "I'm not in an HOA." He sighed. I figured. This isn't the first time we've had issues with that community. We just need to document everything so we can close the case. He walked the property line. He photographed the gate, the posts, the exact GPS boundaries. He shook his head more than once. After about 20 minutes, he returned. "Everything here is legal. The complaint has no merit," he said firmly. "You're fine." But then he added something I didn't expect. "Just a heads up, people who file false claims usually file more." He wasn't wrong. The HOA president shows up that same evening. Around sunset, I heard knocking. Not at the house door. At the gate. And by knocking, I mean pounding, sharp, angry, wooden thuds. I walked out, and standing there was a man in a polo shirt tucked into khakis, name tag clipped to his collar. Behind him, arms crossed and wearing a victorious smirk, was Karen. The man introduced himself as Richard, the HOA president. He said, "We need to speak with you about reopening community access." I leaned against the gate. Calm. Patient. Because I already knew where this was going. "I'm not part of your HOA," I said. "There is no community access on my land." Richard cleared his throat. "We believe the dirt road inside your east fence line was historically used by HOA members for hiking. If you restrict it, you're directly harming our community environment." "That dirt road?" I asked. "The one that hasn't existed for 40 years and is now fully covered in brush?" He ignored that. He continued, "Removing the gate is the easiest solution. Otherwise, we'll be forced to issue formal notices." I smiled a little. "Notices from an HOA I'm not part of?" Karen muttered under her breath, "You should have thought about that before moving here." She genuinely believed she had authority over land she didn't own, over a person she'd never met before this year, over rules that legally could not apply. I responded, "The county already closed your complaint. The gate stays." Richard stiffened. Karen snapped, "You're ruining the community." I responded softly, "Your community ends at that property line." Richard tried one last angle. Something manipulative. Something rehearsed. "We can make this easy or we can make this complicated." I shrugged. "Complicated's fine. I record everything." Richard's jaw ticked. He turned to leave, and Karen whispered something to him that I couldn't make out. But whatever she said made him glare at me with a look I'd only seen in people who hate losing control. They walked off. And I knew something had snapped. The flying drone 2 days later, around noon, I heard a buzzing sound. At first, I thought it was bees near the barn. But it got louder, mechanical, persistent. When I stepped outside, I saw it. A drone. Hovering right above my front porch. I stared at it, stunned. The camera pointed directly at me, then swept across the property. Someone was surveilling my home. I walked into the garage, grabbed a long-handled rake, and lifted it slowly. Not to hit it. Just to make a point. The drone backed up. Flew upward. Then zipped away, directly toward Karen's neighborhood. I recorded the whole thing. And right as I finished filming, my phone buzzed with a notification. "Unknown number, you don't own the sky." I stood there, staring at the message. There was only one person who would say something like that. Karen. The false trespass claim the next morning, I was feeding the horses when a sheriff's patrol car rolled up the driveway. My stomach tightened again, but this time, the deputy seemed relaxed, almost apologetic. "Hey," he said, "we got a call saying you trespassed onto someone's yard last night." I blinked. "What?" "I never left my property yesterday." He nodded. I figured. Caller didn't provide footage. No witness. Just a complaint. I asked who filed it. He hesitated, then said, "A neighbor named Karen." I couldn't help but laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous it had crossed into absurdity. The deputy continued, "Look, off the record, be careful. Some people don't stop when they lose control. They escalate." He paused, then added, "And she sounded determined." A line is crossed that night. I saw something that pushed me from patient tolerance into clear, sharp anger. I was walking toward the gate to lock it when I noticed movement in the tree line. A flashlight. Moving slowly, deliberately. I stopped. Listened. Watched. Someone was walking right along the edge of my fence. Pausing. Peering through. I grabbed my phone and filmed. The silhouette stepped slightly into the moonlight and the shape was unmistakable. It was Karen. Alone. At night. Trespassing along the border of my land like a hunter tracking prey. I called out, "You're trespassing." She didn't flinch. Didn't apologize. She simply said, "This won't end the way you think." Then she walked off into the dark. Not scared, but confident. And that terrified me more than anything. Because it meant she had a plan. A bigger move. Something she believed would finally put me in my place. Whatever she'd been hiding, whatever she'd been constructing behind the scenes. Part 7 ended with me realizing the real battle hadn't even started yet. The gate wasn't the problem anymore. The problem was that Karen was now fighting for control, territory, and pride. And she thought she could win. I didn't sleep much after seeing Karen walking the tree line in the dark. There's something unsettling about watching a grown adult pace your border like a wolf that can't decide when to strike. It wasn't normal anger. It felt personal. Calculated. And by the time the sun rose the next morning, I realized she had finally decided to make her next move. And she wasn't coming alone. The HOA caravan arrives. I was drinking coffee on the porch when I heard a slow, rumbling sound. Multiple engines. Not fast, not frantic, more like a procession. I stepped outside, and what I saw made me put my mug down very carefully. 3 vehicles. SUVs. All with the same decal on the windows, Lake Ridge Estates HOA, Community Compliance Team. You'd think these people were federal agents, the way they pulled up. Doors opened in perfect sync, like some rehearsed intimidation tactic. And then, of course, Karen stepped out of the middle SUV, smiling like this was the day she'd been waiting for. Behind her stood the HOA president, Richard, and 2 other board members I'd never seen before. Clipboards. Polo shirts. Sunglasses. The whole performance. Richard approached the gate first. "Sir," he said, "we're here for an official inspection." I almost laughed. An inspection? Of what? Land they didn't own? Property they had zero jurisdiction over? But I kept my composure and replied calmly, "You're not stepping onto my land." Richard held up a paper like he was holding a warrant. "It's a community compliance notice." I raised an eyebrow. "For a community I'm not in?" He didn't blink. "These notices are mandatory for anyone within a shared regional zone." That phrase, shared regional zone, was new. Invented. Completely made up HOA nonsense. I asked, "Where exactly do you get the authority to inspect private acreage outside your HOA boundary?" Before Richard could answer, Karen stepped forward. "It's simple," she said smugly. "When you bought this land, you became part of our environment. That road your gate blocks is important to the community. We used it for years." There it was again, the historic access lie. I responded, "The county already debunked that." Karen tightened her jaw. "The county doesn't understand the history." I stared at her for a long second. "Neither do you, apparently." That's when one of the board members tried something that shocked even me. He reached through the gate to unlatch it. I instantly stepped forward. "Touch that again and you'll be explaining trespassing to a sheriff," I said, steady but firm. He backed off. "Barely." Karen hissed, "You're making this harder on yourself." I looked at all of them, 4 grown adults standing outside a gate, demanding access to property they did not own, convinced they had power because they were used to controlling people. And I realized something important. This wasn't about the gate anymore. It was about dominance, control, and pride. The letter that changed everything that afternoon. After the caravan finally left, I checked my mailbox. Inside was a thick envelope from the HOA. Even though they weren't supposed to contact me directly, Karen clearly didn't respect rules. I opened it. Inside were a warning notice, a fine for blocking access, a mandatory meeting request, and, shockingly, a map outlining a hiking trail the HOA claimed existed on my property. But the map had a problem. It wasn't a trail. It wasn't even historic use. It was a straight line. A route. Identical to the ATV tracks I'd found. That's when something clicked in my mind. This wasn't just about hiking. This wasn't about community access. Karen had been using my land actively, recently, intentionally. And now that the gate blocked her, she was building a legal-looking lie to justify why she had the right to continue. Suddenly everything lined up. The drone, the nighttime flashlight, the fabricated complaints, the obsessive patrolling, the random objects thrown at my fence, the historic trail claim. Karen wasn't protecting a community. Karen was protecting a secret. And she was desperate to keep it. The unexpected visitor 2 days later, someone else showed up at my gate. Not the HOA. Not the county. Not law enforcement. A woman. Mid-50s. Neatly dressed. Quiet demeanor. She said, "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to talk to you." I hesitated, but something in her expression made me listen. She introduced herself as Elaine, a resident of the same HOA. She whispered, "I'm here because you need to know what's really going on." My chest tightened. I stepped closer to the gate. "Go on." She looked over her shoulder, nervous. "I'm telling you this at night so Karen won't see me." That alone said everything. Then she continued, "Karen isn't protecting a trail. She's protecting her shortcut." I paused. "Shortcut?" Elaine nodded. "For years, Karen has been cutting through your land with her ATV. It shaved off 15 minutes from her commute. She uses it almost every morning and most evenings. She even told people it was her private route." Private route. My land. Used without permission. Elaine looked exhausted. She's been doing it so long, she started believing it was her right. I felt heat rising under my skin. But Elaine wasn't finished. She convinced the HOA board that you were the problem. She told them your gate was a threat to community safety. She lied to them. A lot. I asked one question quietly, "Why are you telling me this?" Elaine exhaled like she'd been holding it for months. "Because she's out of control. And she'll drag all of us down with her. She won't stop. And she's planning something bigger." "What kind of bigger?" I asked. Elaine lowered her voice. "She said she's going to force your hand. And that she's not letting some outsider take her freedom." Freedom. Shortcut. A personal route across someone else's land. Everything made sense now. The obsession. The nighttime pacing. The threats. The historic trail lie. The aggressive HOA involvement. Everything. Karen wasn't fighting for community property. Karen was fighting for her own stolen convenience. And she was willing to burn the world down to keep it. Elaine ended with one final warning, "You didn't hear this from me. I don't want her to ruin another neighbor's life." She left quickly, looking over her shoulder the entire walk back. The breaking point that night, sitting on my porch, I replayed every moment of the past few months. The anger. The intrusions. The lies. The threats. The escalation. And now, finally, the truth. Karen had built her daily routine around trespassing on my land. And my gate wasn't just an inconvenience. It destroyed the shortcut she believed she was entitled to. So she had crafted an entire narrative, a false historic trail, to get it back. But there was something else. Something Elaine said that bothered me deeply. She's planning something bigger. I didn't know what that meant yet. A legal move. Another false complaint. Another late-night trespass. Or something worse. All I knew was this: Karen wasn't done. Not even close. And part 8 ends with one realization: the next move she made would be the one that finally revealed just how far she was willing to go. By now, I knew a few things for certain. Karen wasn't just a difficult neighbor. She wasn't just entitled or manipulative. She was obsessive. Calculated. Dangerous in her persistence. And worse, she had been living a lie for years. A lie built on my property. A lie built on control. A lie that would finally come crashing down. The late night knock. It was a Tuesday night, unusually quiet. I was finishing the last of my paperwork in the cabin when a sharp, insistent knock rattled the front gate. I froze. My heart sank. Not surprise, anticipation. Karen. I didn't need to look to know it. That voice, that presence, that aura of entitlement. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera, and stepped toward the porch, keeping as much distance as possible. "Open up," she shouted. Her voice wasn't angry this time. It was raw, desperate, calculated desperation. I stayed silent. "Open the gate," she continued. "I just want to talk. Please." She crossed the line for a moment. I debated ignoring her. Let her yell. Let her storm off. But something told me, if she left without confrontation, she would escalate to something worse. She needed to be confronted before the next move. I walked down the porch slowly, phone recording. Karen stepped closer immediately, almost into the gate, almost crossing my property line. "Do not step on my property," I said firmly. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling now. Her eyes darted around, scanning the fence, the trees, the hidden sheds she had been using. "This isn't just about the gate. You've ruined everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Ruined everything? I didn't do anything except protect my land." "No," she yelled. Her voice cracked. "You've taken away my shortcut, my projects, my freedom, everything I worked for." And there it was. The truth. Not spoken yet, but laid bare. Karen had been treating my land like her personal kingdom. The secret shed exposed. I took a deep breath. Calm. "You've built structures on my property without permission. You've been trespassing. You've convinced your HOA friends that the land is theirs, and now you're escalating against me." Her face paled slightly. That reaction was a crack in her armor. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I've been managing that land for years. It's been part of my routine, my projects." I pointed toward the trees behind the property. "I know about the sheds. The sheds full of your equipment, your materials, your contractors. All on my property." Her eyes widened. How do you know that?" "I have proof," I said simply. "Trail cameras. Photos. Videos. Time-stamped evidence of every trip, every visit, every item placed on my land." Karen's shoulders slumped. Finally, her anger wavered. Panic replaced it. You could ruin me," she stammered. "I could," I replied. "Or I could just call the sheriff and let the law handle it." The confession, and then it happened. The confession I'd been waiting for, hidden beneath all the bluster and fake outrage. I didn't mean to. Karen's voice trailed off. Her eyes filled with tears. "It started with a shortcut. Then a shed. Then I just kept building. I needed somewhere to put my projects. I thought no one would notice. And then you bought the land and now everything is gone." It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't an apology. But it was the truth. I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm but firm. "Karen, what you did is illegal. Trespassing. Property damage. Misrepresentation to the HOA. And threatening neighbors." She dropped her gaze. A long silence followed. She realized, finally, that her web of control, manipulation, and lies was unraveling. The proof I needed. I pulled out my phone. Showed her the videos, the photos. Each timestamp precise. Each image showing her on my property. Each shed documented. Her contractors' trucks. Even her drone footage, which she clearly didn't realize I had caught on camera. Karen's hands trembled. Her mouth opened and closed. No words came out. I said calmly, "You have a choice. I can take this to law enforcement and HOA mediation, or we can resolve it before it goes further." Finally, she whispered, almost inaudibly, I don't want to go to jail." "You won't, if you stop now and cooperate," I replied. And that was the moment the storm broke. The HOA and the truth. The next day, I contacted the HOA, sent them the photos, videos, and evidence. The historic trail was exposed as a fabrication. The sheds and equipment were all on my property, not HOA land. Karen's multiple false complaints were documented. The HOA board members called an emergency meeting. This time, I didn't hide. I attended with the evidence. Karen tried her usual act of confidence and victimhood. But one by one, her lies were dismantled. Board member 1, invoices and addresses confirm she was misrepresenting property ownership. Board member 2, trail does not exist. Maps are fabricated. Board member 3, trespass confirmed via video evidence. Karen finally broke down in front of everyone. Her control crumbling. She muttered, I didn't think he'd find out." The room went silent. Even some of her staunch supporters realized the deception. The aftermath: Karen's secret empire on my land was exposed completely. The sheds were removed. Contractors stopped visiting. HOA complaints ceased. The false narratives dissolved. I finally felt a sense of relief. But the experience left me changed. I understood the danger of people who feel entitled, who believe a lie long enough that it becomes their reality. I understood the subtle ways manipulation spreads in a community. And I realized the importance of evidence, patience, and calm confrontation in situations like this. Karen never physically attacked me, and no legal action was necessary beyond documentation, but the lessons from this ordeal are priceless. By the end, the gate remained, my land was secure, and the secret control game she'd built was dismantled entirely. The morning after the HOA meeting, everything felt different. Quiet. Calm. Almost surreal. Karen hadn't shown up at the gate. Not in hours, not in days. The SUV caravan, the board members, the nighttime flashlight patrols, all gone. It was as if the storm had finally passed. And in its place, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control over my own land. The aftermath of exposure: the sheds were gone. Contractors had stopped visiting. The shortcut she'd been so desperate to maintain no longer existed in her daily routine. The HOA, embarrassed but relieved to see the evidence, officially acknowledged that the complaints had no merit. Their board sent a formal notice to Karen stating that any further trespassing or misrepresentation could lead to legal consequences. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't humiliation. It was justice. Karen's empire of control and deceit had been dismantled not by threats, not by force, but by truth, evidence, and persistence. A reflection on control and obsession: what struck me most about Karen wasn't her anger. It wasn't her insistence that she had rights that didn't exist. It was her obsession. For years, she had built an entire routine, entire identity, around my land. A shed here. A dirt road there. A drone in the sky. HOA manipulation. Complaints. Flyers. Surveillance. Threats. All for what? A shortcut. A few minutes saved. Illusions of control. And when reality challenged her, she escalated. She became desperate. Dangerous. Creative in ways most people wouldn't imagine. I realized something very important: people who feel entitled will do anything to maintain their illusion of control. It's not about fairness. It's not about rules. It's about perception and power. The importance of evidence: from the very beginning, I documented everything. Trail cameras capturing every visit, photos of sheds, materials, entire tracks, video of drone flights, time-stamped evidence of nighttime trespass. Without that evidence, Karen might have succeeded in spinning her narrative. Without it, the HOA might have believed her lies. Without it, I would have been fighting a battle I couldn't win. Evidence isn't just proof, it's protection. It's your shield against manipulation, deception, and people who believe they can rewrite reality. Karen's last attempt: even after the HOA confirmed the truth, Karen didn't give up entirely. A week later, I found another note taped to the mailbox: "You think this is over. It's not. You'll regret this." I took a deep breath, documented the note, and placed it in the folder with all the other evidence. It was the last time she tried to assert control. The last time she threatened me. From that moment on, she disappeared from my property entirely. No surveillance. No trespassing. No HOA complaints. No flyers. No drones. It was finally over. Lessons learned: looking back, I learned several things. Boundaries matter. If you don't protect your property and rights, someone else will try to bend reality to their advantage. Stay calm and document everything. Anger and confrontation rarely solve these situations. Evidence does. People escalate when challenged. Karen wasn't unreasonable. She was calculating. She believed she could win by persistence, lies, and social pressure. Community perception can be manipulated. She almost turned the HOA and neighbors against me, but documentation, patience, and calm communication prevented that. Justice doesn't always require revenge. It's about exposing the truth, protecting yourself, and letting the law or the facts do the rest. The gate and peace today, the gate stands as it always did, secure, private, and untouched. It's more than a fence. It's more than a barrier. It's a symbol of persistence, of standing up for what is right, of protecting your space and your peace. I check the trail cameras now occasionally, but mostly, I walk my property knowing I have reclaimed it entirely. The sheds, the drones, the nighttime trespasses, all gone. Karen is a chapter of the past. And while the scars of anxiety and vigilance remain, the lessons are invaluable. Final thoughts: what started as a simple land purchase became a war of ego, lies, and obsession. Karen believed she had rights that didn't exist. She built stories, alliances, and structures on top of my land. She escalated with threats, manipulation, and intimidation. But in the end, truth mattered, evidence mattered, patience mattered. She was exposed. The HOA recognized the reality. The lies crumbled. And my land, my peace, and my boundaries were restored. Justice isn't always dramatic. It isn't always immediate. But it is satisfying when truth finally prevails over manipulation and deceit. As I walk through the cleared fields, past the now empty shed areas, past the locked gate that held strong through every storm, both literal and figurative, I realize something. The hardest battles are not against people, but against their illusions of entitlement. And winning those battles doesn't require rage or revenge. It requires clarity, patience, and the courage to stand firm. For anyone listening, watching, or going through a situation like this, protect your space. Document everything. Stay calm. And let truth be your strongest weapon. Because when it's all said and done, truth doesn't just survive. It prevails.